Hi, I'm Madeleine Rogers and I'm the translator of As the Eagle Flies by Nolwenn Le Blevennec, which is forthcoming from Peirene Press in October 2023. But if you listen to this and decide that you need it sooner than that, you just can't wait, then it is going out to Peirene subscribers at the end of August, so you can get it sooner if you subscribe to Peirene. It's Nolwenn's debut novel and my debut translation, and it is essentially the story of an affair. So it focuses on a young woman who's a journalist and a mother of two young children with her partner, Igor, who is much older than her. And then she meets another man called Joseph and begins an affair with him. So it's basically the sort of story of these two very different relationships and their trajectories, and it's very sort of funny and contemporary and self-deprecating. And so I'm going to read from the first part of the book, which is called In the Air, which sort of details the very heady whirlwind romance that she has with this other man, Joseph. And I'm going to read from the part where she starts to realise that it's not all quite as rosy as it seemed. According to my personal archives, it was during the first days of October that Joseph showed the first signs of withdrawing. All of a sudden, I don't know why, he was keen to make me understand that he wouldn't leave his partner. All the while continuing his I love yous and I wanna fuck yous on drip, he started to make horrible declarations under the horrible white lights of the places we'd have lunch. In a gourmet restaurant near work, in front of quirkily shaped plates and cutlery that we didn't know what to do with, since we hadn't actually felt hungry in several weeks, he started to shoot little jets of unpleasantness at me, with his index finger and thumb, aiming at my forehead. Over the starters, he announced that he'd had a very nice message from his partner, and that he was going to join her where she was currently on assignment. There was a public holiday coming up, so they were going to take the opportunity to spend the long weekend together. It was perfectly normal. So there you go, he was off to Metz for 4 days. Very nice message, very nice message, very nice message. I was surprised that my plate, the microscopic portion of food on it, my designer chair and the floor underneath it went all immediately drenched in a pool of blood. I was wounded, jealous. I was hurt that he didn't think our relationship, given its intensity, was the sort to call everything else into question. At the very least, the use of public holidays. On returning to the office, draped in my dignity, I sent him an email asking him never to speak to me again. Give me some time, I'll come back to you, but I can't take it anymore. No fear of sounding ridiculous. It's one of the first of what I call my 2 o'clock emails, those sent in the wake of a frustrating lunch. Joseph replied that he wanted to gouge his own eyes out for having hurt me, an equal level of ridiculousness. But he didn't recant. He stayed as resolute as a judge in Louisiana who, despite always being viewed as a humanist, has just handed down a death sentence. So that's where we were. Now we see how men like Joseph take control of the situation. They lament the harm they do to the other person, but claim that, while it's deeply regrettable, they can't do anything about it. It's the notorious responsibility without blame that we see in civil law. Careful, don't take it the wrong way. If I've hurt you, it's not necessarily because I've behaved badly. It might even be the opposite. Of course, this is false. What's true, and Joseph admitted to being one of them on that very first evening, is that there are men who live beyond their emotional means, who conduct love affairs without the necessary courage. To buy themselves some time, they declare the situation inalterable, an act of God. And instead of saying, I don't want to, they say, it's impossible. That day, Joseph responded to my sadness as if he had no way to act on it, as if he had no arms, no legs, nothing but a heart beating on a table. Before this silence begins, I want you to know that I'm in love with you. Alas, this great silence, imposed by me and regretted a minute later, didn't last more than a day. And so Joseph was very quickly able to have another go at this particular form of emotional cruelty. His little torture chamber was now a cut above in its methods of torment. Or, from another point of view, he was simply asserting his autonomy. This time, we were in a meeting room at the office when he told me he'd organised a romantic weekend away with his girlfriend. 2 nights in a year to Normandy. It was necessary. Maintaining his primary relationship would allow ours to go at its own pace. By the way, you look after Igor too. In the moment, I kept quiet. I pretended to understand his story of precariously balancing the 4 of us. but I was spinning out all night, and when I arrived at the office the next morning, I set about looking through the numerous websites offering such a stupid experience. I typed yurt plus Normandy countryside plus romantic into Google. There were dozens of versions of the concept. For reasons that now escape me, I thought I'd found the right place, and, like a scorned woman dropping a mistress's red thong on the breakfast table, I sent him the link to the site in question, sneering at it. He was still asleep. Thinking about it now, it was at this exact moment that I became an awful, bitter crybaby. Abbreviation, ABC. Definition, victimized attitude that would make anyone go limp immediately, and which generally makes people fall out of love with you in a few weeks. That's what I'd become. That morning, I'd written at 9:03, a go to hell. At 9:18, I'm sorry, I'm not angry anymore, crying instead, forget I said that. The insult followed by flagellation, the erratic woman, worst case scenario. I was just missing the bucket on my head and manic cackle to pass for a total lunatic. For his part, Joseph now had confirmation that he could do anything he liked to me. Hundreds of billions of hours later, he replied that my messages that morning had made him furious, that they were impossibly malicious, and, quite honestly, it seemed I'd decided to wreck what we had. Rereading his reply, years later, sends me back into an otherworldly rage. And if I was in such a rage at the time, it's because at that stage of our affair I could no longer sleep with Igor. I could barely bring myself to look him in the eye. I was angry because I was absolutely incapable of imagining a romantic spa, yurt, massage weekend or any other similar nonsense with my own partner. Not because my relationship was in worse shape than his, as he seemed to think, but because I had, and still have, only one channel for my emotions, and he had overridden it in every possible way. I was angry because I could no longer see myself living without him, and I was now certain that he was destroying everything I had been building for the last 7 years, all for nothing. When, one morning in November 2016, Donald Trump was elected President of the United States, Joseph was the first person I wanted to talk to. I'd rubbed shoulders with Trump's daughter Ivanka as a teenager, at an American tennis camp. One day I beat her at doubles. She's a very pretty girl, but she can't run. I mention this for the sake of history. The evening of the election, I got out the photos of her, badly shot but in a swimming costume, that I'd been keeping for years in my pink Bugs Bunny kid's suitcase. I have lots of them because my mother would ask me to take some every summer. So to please her, I developed certain strategies. I pretend to be taking a picture of the scenery and then put Ivanka in the viewfinder at the last moment. In one of these photos, she's looking at the camera. She seems to know what I'm up to. Seeing her on every television in the world that morning gave me the impression of being absolutely minuscule. My epitaph, the girl who once briefly played tennis with Trump's daughter in 1995. Whereas for 2 months, Joseph had put me at the centre of everything. The eye of God, or the camera of the great director of the universe, was always upon us and so close up that it had lost all perspective. After Trump's election, things were never simple again.